Hello there everyone, and it is I, Baby Crone, and I am back again. Well, I am here to tell you guys, we're going to be talking about today about transits, and what transits have really got me thinking about today is opening up a page to talk about with you munchkins, crones, and chickens, to talk about astrology, and also talk about transits, because transits are always happening constantly, and there are significant transits, as you will find out in this video, that are important and worth note taking, and I want to keep you guys relevant on what's going on in the world around us, not just in pop culture, but also in astrology, because we are an esoteric station. So make sure you go check it out. I am the Baby Crone on Instagram. And also, since we're doing promotions, check out the old Crone on Instagram as well. She does tarot readings Monday through Friday, midday love tarot reading. So go find out what's going on in your neck of the woods. Well, with that, I hope you enjoy your love life, and hopefully those readings connect, and hopefully these transits connect with you as well. So let's get started with our lesson today. Ta-da! Transits, the development of a person. Now, I know earlier, if you've been keeping up with the astrology lesson, I was talking about how the zodiac signs, the 12 zodiac signs, represent how a person grows throughout life and how they develop through life, because they represent 12 stages of a significant human person's life. However, transits also talk about significant, important parts of our lives, because transits happen every day. So you're probably asking, what is a transit? Well, by definition, it is the continuous movement of planets as they orbit around the sun. And really, in astrology, it's not heliocentric, which means everything's based on the sun. It's geocentric, which means everything's based off of the earth, because we live on the earth. So therefore, everything on the chart is how everything is moving in respect to us, the earth. So you're probably wondering, if transits are just planets moving, how is that different from the natal chart? Well, the natal chart, as I mentioned before, is the snapshot of when you were born. And this is like permanent, like it's stopped. This is like planets frozen in time, and you're that energy walking around through life. And because you're walking through life and you have permanent fixed energy inside you, but there's forever moving and changing energy around you, this energy affects you, and therefore you change day to day, you grow, you come against challenges or obstacles in life. And this is what transits are all about, how the outside world is affecting you. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. This is the greatest part of astrology, because this is literally putting everything we've talked about, zodiac signs, houses, planets, aspects, all put into perspective. And I will be showing you guys how to read transits as well. But first, before I do that, I will show you guys how to read your natal chart or birth chart. I switch between the two, and those, you can look forward to videos on those. So hopefully you guys enjoy that as well. So therefore, you're probably wondering if you've thought about aspects. How are transits and aspects different? As I said, planets, the transiting planets that are moving today, affect you personally, but how do planets interact? They only interact through aspects. So therefore, transits, even though they're constantly moving, they only affect you directly if they're making an aspect to a planet inside of you. Because what makes transits different is the fact that when you're in your natal chart, everything is personal to you. But when you're looking at a transit charts, aka what the planets look like today, that's for everybody, because everybody's alive, so therefore this is not their birth chart, so therefore they don't have that permanent energy inside them. So therefore that's how aspects and transits are different, because aspects only make connections and affect you by making aspects to planets in your natal chart. So transits, aspects, I wish I had a line. Ooh, I'll put in editing. Transits make an aspect to natal planet. And if they don't, then they're not in harmony or in connection with each other, and therefore it's not significant. So this is something very important and a very important concept. So, how do you read a transit then, you may be asking, if it's all about aspects and all you see in the chart is aspects? So how are these aspects different from the natal chart aspects? Well, I'm glad you guys asked that. So transits, as I said, only make sense when comparing it to your birth chart. However, you can look at it as a daily chart, and if you look at it as a daily chart, you can get daily reads and daily energies. So what's so important on a daily chart? If a planet changes a zodiac sign, because they do as they move, so I'm going to talk more in depth about that. If a planet changes houses, now even though they change zodiac signs, they might not change houses as often depending on some people's birth charts. A house could look this wide or this small. It just depends. It's the way the system is. Even though they're differently sized, they're all 30 degrees. This is 30 degrees and this is 30 degrees. It's just all depending on how the chart and sky was looking at the time you were born. But what's also important is when a planet goes retrograde or goes direct, which means it's no longer retrograde. And what's very important, extremely important, if a planet stops making an aspect or it creates an aspect. And this is all in reference to your natal chart. But if you don't want to look at it into your natal chart, and if you just want to look at a sign, how a planet changes sign that day, you will feel that energy. These are like significant energies you will feel regardless, basically. But the last point about the aspects is something you're only going to feel individually. Everything else on this list above aspects is earthly. So, to get you guys to understand more what I'm talking about, because it's probably hard to picture this, as you see, we have a chart, and today we're in Sagittarius because we're at the end of fall. So Sagittarius is this arrow sign right here, and you see the sun at 9 degrees. This is very important. I'm going to only highlight parts that I want you to take notice that are easy to point out. So you see where Sagittarius and the sun is, right? I took this very early in the morning. As you see, it was almost 10 o'clock in the morning. So this is where the sun is, roughly at 10 in the morning, every day. Regardless, 10 o'clock a.m., this is where the sun is going to be. And another part I want you to look at, Capricorn was rising at the time of this. And you see this symbol right here, which is Pluto. These are two important parts I just want you to look at. Here is a picture of what a natal chart looks like with transits on top of it. So, on this chart, this is Kurt Cobain from Nirvana. Sagittarius is now here at the bottom of the chart instead of over here where Leo is. And that is because this is where Sagittarius is. This was where Sagittarius was when Kurt Cobain was born. So therefore, Sagittarius will always stay there. But planets are just going to be moving around on the outside. And as you see on the next page, I'm going to reorientate it so you can see exactly what I mean. Over here on the left hand picture, you see Sagittarius and the sun. On the right hand picture, I have twisted the Kurt Cobain birth chart so that way Sagittarius looks roughly in the 10th house. I mean the 11th house at 10 o'clock in comparison to this chart. So as you see, the sun is still in Sagittarius, still here in what looks roughly 10 o'clock a.m. And then Capricorn is right here, which looks below the horizon if you shifted these black lines where they're supposed to be. So that's how you're able to see the natal chart and the transit charts together. And here's a picture side by side to reiterate that transits can look different for two different people. In this chart, keeping with the Sagittarius example, Sagittarius is over here in the 8th house on the right hand picture, and you see the sun. Now, I did take this about maybe 20 minutes apart, so the sun moved very quickly from where it was compared to where it looks like on the bottom left hand picture on Kurt Cobain's chart. So I do apologize for that, but I just thought about it last minute because I wanted to show you guys how, as you see, these are aspects that are being made in the natal chart, but also in comparison to the transits, and they are different based off of each chart. So you can see different aspects are going to affect different people. So I hope you guys understand that a little bit more, but I will do an in-depth video breaking down on how to really do this. So before we go any further, we're back to astronomy. I mean, astrology is astronomy, but science just wants to keep out the esoteric and religion out of it. Whatever. So what are the key things I really want you to take note? Well, this is the order of the planets. We start from Mercury and we end with Neptune. Now in real life, they do not include Pluto, so Pluto's excluded. But in astrology, Pluto's still included. So after Neptune is Pluto. And as you see their distances from the sun. Now you clearly can't see in this picture how far spread out they are. So at the very bottom, this is very important to know how far apart they are, because this also affects how they orbit and how long they stay in a sign and how long it takes to make a complete cycle, because it's all based off of how far each planet is away from the sun. Now I know I said that the birth chart is geocentric and focused on the sun, on how everything looks like in perspective of the earth. That is true, yes, but that's because everything orbits around the sun just like the earth. Yet we're not on the sun, so we can't see how everything orbits in perspective of the sun. We can only see how things orbit in perspective of the earth. And that's why in the center of this birth chart, this circle with a little X represents Earth, and these are the planets rotating around Earth. So this is a football field to give you guys a clear visualization. These are the inner planets. Mars is right here, this M, and if you follow this white line down to here, represents Mars, and everything before that is what they call the inner planets. And the inner planets are the planets that orbit closest to the sun, and they orbit faster, therefore they affect us more often. And you see they are really bunched and tight together. But once you get towards the outer planets, they're really big and they're also really far spread out compared to the inner planets that are all smushed up like this. So in this picture, you see how far Jupiter is in comparison to Saturn, which is in comparison to Uranus, okay? That's all I need you to know. And because of this, this is how we get each day of the year for the planets. So a year on Mercury is 88 days, just like a year on Earth is 365 days. So therefore, all the way far out, Neptune's year is 165 years. Not 165 days, 165 years. So after Mars, which is 687 days, all the planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, take years to complete a year, an Earth year, basically. Everything's in the perspective of Earth, because how are we going to understand something that's not us? So because of that, planets come full circle in a cycle, because if you're right here, you're eventually going to move and have to come back. So you've come full circle. Literally, you went around in an entire circle. The birth chart is a circle, so therefore Jupiter right here is going to travel across the chart. I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Jupiter is going to travel across the chart. And as Jupiter travels across the chart, it's eventually going to end up back in the same sign at the same exact degree. And that is what I'm going to talk about on the next slide after this. But to talk about this is how planetary cycles are determined. And as you see on the birth chart, there are 4 main angles. There's this big red black angle right here, which is the up and down, the midheaven and the bottom heaven, and then the horizon line, which is the rising and the descending. These are angles, and these represent significant points of aspects. So this is considered an opposition, this is an opposition, this is considered a square, this is considered a square, and so forth with the squares. So to get that to understand, that's 4 different points. So therefore, a cycle is divided up into 4 sections. And this is how we get planetary cycles. And so, talking about planetary cycles, we have to talk about planetary returns. We're all familiar with our solar return, which is every year on our birthday. That's when the sun appears at the same degree in the same sign every year, and that's your birthday. Hope that's fun. And to break that down, so this also a zodiac cycle, what I mean, how long does it take to go through one zodiac sign? So the sun takes 1 month to go through a zodiac sign, and therefore it changes signs every month. Something very important, which we're going to be talking about a little bit in depth when we talk about retrograde, is Mercury. And because it travels so fast, it's closest to the sun. Because we are talking about speeds and how things increase depending on how far away you are from the sun, I am listing every planet in order. So we go from sun, and because we are on Earth, the moon replaces Earth. So it goes Venus, Earth, Mars, but we're on Earth. But what orbits the Earth is the moon. So it goes Venus, Moon, Mars, just so you know. So speaking of that, lunar returns, yes, you have a moon sign, and your moon sign has a lunar return literally every month, because it takes the moon 28 days to complete a cycle, new moon to new moon. And therefore, because of that, it changes zodiac signs every 2.5 days. This is the fastest moving planet. It's a luminary, but it's considered a planet. Because this is the fastest moving planet, it changes zodiac signs every 2.5 days. So therefore, there's a sign change. Almost 12, actually, I'm going to change that. It's not 12 times a year. That was my mistake in the math. But another another planetary return that's very important that we talk about, that I'm going to talk about more in depth, is your Saturn return. And it returns every 28 years, sometimes 29, and they'll say 29 and a half. But I was taught 28. And because of that, it changes zodiac signs every 2.5 years. And because of that, that means it changes sign every 2 years. And planets that don't have planetary returns are Neptune and Pluto, because we don't live to be 165, and God, we don't live to be 250. So we'll never see Pluto and Neptune return in our lifetime. So, to break down cycles a bit more, as I did really quickly earlier, but lunar cycles, to talk about cycles, we have to start with observing what's around us and understand our backyard neighbor, the moon. So the moon travels around us, and if you look at the moon right now, you will see that it is a half a moon, and the best way I can describe it, and it makes me happy every time I see a half a moon. If you think about it, why is it a half a moon? Half of the moon is lit, and that means half of the moon is facing the sun, and the other half of the moon is not facing the sun. So if you see a half a moon and the sun just set, think about this. The sun just set and you see a half a moon still up in the sky. It could, okay, let's say the sun just set here and this is where the moon is. That means, for example, my face is Earth, this is the moon, and you are the sun. Me and the moon are like this right now, and we're facing the sun at each other. So that's why. And because somebody on Earth is able to look off at the sun, they see the half-lit sun, and they see the non-half-lit moon. Sorry, the half-lit moon, the non-half-lit moon, as you see in this picture right here. And because of this, we have 4 distinct phases. And that means if you divide 28 days by 4, that's 7 days. So that means every week we have a new phase of the moon. So therefore, the first one, okay, we start at the new moon. It's not always on the first week, but because a month is 4 weeks, the first week of the month, new moon. Second week of the month, first quarter, which means 1/4, because the new moon is 0. Just to put that into perspective. Then you have the full moon, which could be considered the second quarter, which just basically means a half. If you want to think about quarters, we're at 25% at first quarter. Full moon, we're at 50%. Third quarter, we're 3/4 of the way there, or 75% there. And then we're back at the new moon and we're at 100%, but we're basically starting over, so we're at 0 again. And we start the cycle over. And the planets go through these cycles through your birth charts, through an opposition and a square. And a square only. So let's talk about planetary cycles. It is a lot, so I'm not going to talk about, but I'm just going to talk about the main points that I wanted to really talk about. So the sun, planetary cycle, 365 days, which is a year. So break that up into 4. That's 3 months. Every 3 months, there's a significant aspect, whether it's a square or an opposition to the sun. And what does this mean? Well, I forgot to mention, this is all in perspective to your natal chart. Everything I'm going to be talking about in this video is to your natal chart. So let's say your natal sun is right here, and it's now making a square. Well, the sun, natal sun, and transit sun's moving up. We're now at a square. So this is our first challenge. Transit sun continuing to move up. We're at a half. Now we're at 2 quarters or a half in the opposition. We're facing our second challenge. Continue moving. Now we're at our third challenge or our third quarter, and now we're about to come full circle and in our planetary return. And now we've completed a cycle, made our fourth quarter or our last challenge, but now we're also starting new and fresh again. So now it's time to start a new cycle. Let go of the old, and now time to start the new. Learned the lessons in the last cycle, time to start new lessons. So that's how you break down this. I mean, that's literally forever because it's 4. It's always going to be that. This is 1 aspect, this is 2 aspects, this is 3 aspects, this is 4 aspects. It's always going to be like that in the chart. Just like the lunar cycles, it's always going to have these angles. So to take this picture even a bit further, okay, let's start right here with the new moon. This is your transit, this is your natal moon. And then this moon out here is your transit moon, moving around through its cycles until it comes back around to reach its natal position where it was. And right here, as there are cycles, these cycles can be broken down further. Oh, actually, you know what? I did forget to mention that even though this is important, and to quickly go back to the sun example, what's so important is that every 3 months is this new season. So therefore something significant is changing. So that's a good way to think about the sun. But this significant period only lasts 3 days. So whatever the sun touches, whatever aspect it makes, regardless if it's a square and opposition, this means all aspects now. Any aspect the sun makes, it lasts for 3 days. So that's very important. And going back to the moon, as I said, the moon moves very fast. And I said that its significant points of aspects are every 7 days. So once a week, there's a significant aspect to the sun. To the moon. Sorry about that, guys. And because the moon moves so fast, that the aspect that the moon makes only lasts 3 hours. Guys, there's 24 hours in a day. Oh my God, that's crazy, right? And because Pluto moves so far, it's actually hard to get the planetary cycle for Pluto because Pluto's just so far out there that planetary cycles varies from here to there. And because of that, its aspects periods vary from day to day. From year to year. Yeah, Pluto, I could see why they might exclude Pluto, but for astrology purposes, Pluto's important. Because astrology was there before they denounced Pluto from being a planet. So all these NAs mean that ages, literally year to year stuff, is not important because they move too fast. And as I said, Neptune and Pluto never have planetary returns, so therefore you're never going to feel the age of when the planetary return comes. So therefore really only Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus are important. And as you'll see, on each of these I have them bolded and highlight and have a star next to them. And this is important because this represents a cycle. So you start at 0. Let's start with Jupiter for a Jupiter return. And let's start with Saturn, because I said Saturn we're going to talk about in more in depth. A Saturn return happens here I have to put 29 years because that's what the book I was referring to used, but a different book I learned told me 28 years. But so the Saturn returns every 29 years. So therefore you're born. Bloop. All right, so 29 divided by 4 is 7. So the first time you really feel Saturn is at 7 years old. And then you'll feel Saturn again at 14. And then you'll feel Saturn again at 21. And then it's like, boom, 29. Hello, I'm back. Saturn return. And then the cycle starts over again. You'll feel Saturn again at 35. You feel Saturn again at 42. Then feel it again at 50. Then bam, hello, we're back at your Saturn return at 58. And these are very significant parts of the chart because 28 to 30 is considered maturing age. 58, that's considered, really, is it midlife? You're kind of dealing with the midlife and the changes of life and growing old. And then 87, you're pretty much just planning for your death and you're preparing on what your future life is going to be and start putting your energy into that. So, to break down a little bit, we're going to talk about daily transits because you can look at transits in many different ways. You can look at it daily, you can look at it monthly, and you can look at it yearly. So how to look at daily transits. As I said, the moon moves the fastest out of everything. So therefore, when you're looking at the chart, really only the moon is important. But because the sun is also our life force and our light, and also whatever the sun touches is a highlight and a central focus. By touch, I mean touch in aspects, which means forming a connection. Therefore, the sun, whatever the sun is aspecting that day, is also important to you as well. And whatever the transiting moon is making an aspect to, it could affect you if it makes an aspect to your natal moon or something else in your natal chart. It doesn't even have to make an aspect to your natal moon. And as you'll see, I'll be going back between natal moon and transit moon, or like transit planet and natal planet, so that way you can understand the difference, because they're all planets. So how do I differentiate the planets that we're talking about? So as I said, in daily transits, only the sun and the moon are important when looking at, and then of course, any time a planet changes sign, house, or it goes retrograde or direct, which means stops going retrograde, are significant days too, because those are like energy points that are like so strong that you're gonna feel it no matter what, regardless if it's an aspect or not. So monthly transits, well, what changes monthly? The moon, not the moon. The sun changes sign every month, and Venus also changes signs every month. So therefore, when looking at monthly transits, looking at where Venus, because Venus is about love and pleasures and what you like to create and share in on with people. So looking at what planets are aspecting and connecting to Venus every month is very important, as well as still looking at what aspects are touching the sun that month, and is the sun, as I had mentioned earlier, every 3 days the sun changes aspects. So therefore there are 30 days, so that means roughly every 10 days the sun is making a different aspect. So what are the different aspects that the sun are making throughout the month are very important, because that shows you what different things you were focused on in that month. Well, really everybody, but some people are going to feel more focused on it than others, because it's making aspects to your natal planets, make you want to feel more attention to them during this monthly transit. So, and I will continue to say, if a planet goes retrograde that month, or direct, which means it stops going retrograde, or if a planet changes sign, house, it changes sign or zodiac sign. Change zodiac signs or change houses. That's always important, regardless if it's monthly, yearly, or daily. But I will mention again the yearly transits. So, oh my God, we're looking at an entire year. So much happens in a year. How am I supposed to track that? Am I supposed to track it every single month and look at every month to see what is going on? Well, I am glad you asked that, because really, monthly transits are like the small picture, and then the yearly transits are like the big picture. Like, what is the year consisting of? So this is really, this is where the stamp goes. If a planet goes retrograde within the year, I will talk about transits, talk about retrogrades at the end of the episode. But if a planet goes retrograde or direct during the year, that is very important. And if they're making aspects during their points of retrograde are also important. And what also is important, the sun, moon, and earth align in a certain way that we get solar and lunar eclipses twice a year of each. And because of that, that's something also important to look at yearly. And therefore you can also look at that monthly, but that's only like for 2 months out of the year. So really, You're not going to be looking for a solar or lunar eclipse monthly, so that's something you will look for yearly. So this is why I said you're looking at the big pictures, just like the things that are like very significant in the year, because you can sum it all up. It's like a checklist. And then when you look at the checklist, you have a header or like a theme for the checklist, and if you check everything off, you've completed the theme. Well, that's what you're doing when you're looking at yearly transits. You're looking at what are the important points that are happening in the year that add to this theme. So, what is a retrograde? Well, retrograde is the apparent motion of going backwards. So like two things could be going like this and like going together like this, and then suddenly it just seems like it's going like that, but it's really not. And I looked this up because I wanted to see what the name of this is. It's called the wagon wheel effect.
As it speeds up, we can clearly see that from our point of view, it's rotating counterclockwise. However, keep watching carefully as it reaches full speed. I can't see this effect in person, but in this video, it looks like the fan has switched direction and is now rotating clockwise. This is called the wagon wheel effect.
I will try to put a video up of it to show the best example. What I want to show is of two cars moving or a train, because that's so easy to picture of those two objects moving together, because we've all experienced being in a car and you're looking at a car and you know you're both going forward, but suddenly it somehow feels like the car next to you is reversing, but you know you both are going forward. This is what a retrograde is, and that's what they call a wagon wheel effect. It's because of how things spin in a circle. So another example, as I will put in this video right here, you will see a fan moving. The fan's moving so fast it suddenly looks like it's going backwards. And you're just like, how did that happen? And then suddenly it's just like, and you're just like, that's what a retrograde motion is. Planets literally are not moving backwards. It's based off of how they just appear to move. And in this picture right here, the best example they chose is Mars, because Mars is outside of Earth. So here's Earth moving, and then at some point they're at equals with each other, at a conjunction, and now they're starting to move away from each other. Actually, you know, that's very interesting. And then it starts to move away from each other. As you see, they're both moving forward, but because the Earth has passed Mars, it just looks like Mars is moving backwards, and that's all because of the speeds, because the faster a planet spins, the closer you are to the sun, and the slower a planet spins, the farther out you are from the sun. And because of this, by spin, I should have said orbit. The faster you orbit the sun, you're closer to the sun, and the slower you orbit the sun, you're farther away from the sun. And that's why planets that are so far away from the sun take years to orbit or go around the sun, compared to Mercury, which only takes 88 days to go around the sun. And that's not even an entire year that it takes the Earth to go around the sun. So because of that, that's why it's very important. And here are some and here is your retrograde periods. So what is very important to note is that the sun and moon, because they literally aren't planets, we just call them planets in astrology, but they are really called luminaries because they give off light. Really, in astronomy, all planets give off light. It's just the ones that aren't luminaries are just giving off infrared light, which just means basically they're giving off body heat. We just can't see body heat. So if you think about that, we're planets as well, because we have body heat, and therefore we are generating infrared light. That if you literally put up a camera, you can see that the center of our body will be all lit up and very bright like the sun, and then it will look cooler the farther you go out. I mean, it depends how your body temperature and how your heat distributes through your body. But it's cool. I've seen it done in astronomy, so they can help us visualize that planets give off light even though we can't see light. And it's not the light. And you've seen pictures of the Earth at night and you see the different cities lit up at night. No, we're not talking about that kind of light. We're actually talking about light like the sun gives off, but not literally that light. That's UV light. That's a different type of light. That's a light we can see because it's visible, and that's why we see everything around us. However, yeah. Now, that was just something briefly to talk about astronomy a bit, and also to talk about planets to make sense of. I hope that helps somebody understand a little bit more about astrology. But because of that, the sun and moon do not have retrogrades. It would make sense that the sun doesn't have a retrograde, because how's the sun going to look like it's moving faster or slower compared to us if we're the ones orbiting it? And literally the sun is basically doing this. It's not doing a this like planets. It's basically like this. So it's not going to really look different no matter where we are. And that's kind of like how the moon is for the earth. Where the sun and the moon is the earth. So therefore, to us, the moon is never going to look retrograde because it's around us. It just made sense to me when I thought about it and started explaining to you guys, because I'm just like, makes sense. So because of that, and I said I will talk about Mercury. Mercury is very important because Mercury is the most often planet that has a retrograde motion, and that is every Mercury retrograde lasts 3 weeks, and Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year, roughly. Sometimes 4 times a year. Woo! That's yikes. So that means almost every month, Mercury is going retrograde. And Mercury is all about how we communicate with each other, how we gather information, and how we also process information. So that going retrograde is like being unable to process information, unable to think clearly, not able to get your point across, and being misunderstood. So if you ever feel like that during certain parts of the month, every year, it's because of a Mercury retrograde. So that's what's very important. And then some of the outer planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they have such longer periods. They're like literally retrograde for half a year at a time. So that means they only have retrogrades once a year, which is very good, because I don't think we could handle those are very long retrograde periods, and those are very good times for reflecting. Because it's like a time for standstill. Do not do anything like associated with that planet. Like, for example, Jupiter. Jupiter's all about giving and being giving and be overgiving sometimes, but also being just in what you give. Well, when Jupiter's retrograde, it's a time to be careful of what you're giving out, because maybe you might not get that back, or you might feel that give. You might feel like the loss of that give you gave. Like, let's say, for example, money. You gave money to somebody, but now, something came up and you're just like, I needed that money, why did I give it away? But hey, you gave it away in good faith, and you can't feel bad for that, but that's just a time to learn and reflect and really take time to think about stuff before you go off in lending. So, that's a lesson, for example, about retrogrades. So, in my next videos, as I said, I will be talking about how to read these transits and your natal chart. And I will go through with you guys on how to create a profile, enter your date and information, and navigate the website I use to show you natal charts every day. So with that being said, I can't wait to see you guys to talk more about transits and help you guys literally visualize it. Let's start breaking down charts. Alright, see you guys later. Bye!